Centuries of Oppression, The Road to 1918. Chapter 3. The Era of Domestic Trades. The trade guilds introduced the first elements of social security, recognising that the pursuance of a trade was a family business. The guilds afforded a structured apprenticeship system, and this took place within the master's house. Just as a feudal villein might be running a small family business involving wife, sons, daughters, hired men and serving girls, so a town-based master tradesman would be operating a household business with the assistance of his wife and comprising not only their children, but also apprentices, journeymen and domestic servants, all housed in the master's house. And if the master was the chief executive officer, his wife was the rest of the executive board. It is too little appreciated now that apprentices were not just apprenticed to the master. Because they were to live in the master's house, perhaps for 7 years or more, in a situation of domestic subservience to the master's wife, an apprentice was indentured both to the master and the master's wife. Here is an extract from the indenture of one John Goff to learn the craft of fishing from 1459. The aforesaid John Goff shall well and faithfully serve the aforesaid John Gibbs and Agnes his wife, as his masters and lords, shall keep their secrets, shall everywhere willingly do their lawful and honourable commands, shall do his masters no injury, nor see any injury done to them by others, but prevent the same as far as he can, shall not waste his master's goods, nor lend them to any man without his special command. And the aforesaid John Gibbs and Agnes his wife shall teach, train, and inform or cause the aforesaid John Goff their apprentice to be informed in the craft of fishing in the best way they know, chastising him duly, and finding for the same John, their apprentice, food, clothing, linen, and woolen, and shoes, sufficiently as befits such an apprentice to be found, during the term aforesaid. While one might refer to such domestic trade arrangements as patriarchal, in the sense that the man was the accepted master of the trade and figurehead for the business, this can hardly be interpreted as an hegemony, still less as oppressive to the wife, who was second in command in such a business. Instead, it provided a means by which the wife could contribute substantially to their joint enterprise without compromising her ability to bear and raise children and direct all things domestic. The conflict between paid work and family duties, which figures so prominently in modern gender politics, was avoided under these arrangements because the business was so inextricably linked to the domestic in any case. I should not give the impression, however, that the trade guilds achieved a halcyon bliss of egalitarianism. Behind it all still lurked the power of the monarchy, which could make itself felt at any time it wished. For example, despite the power of the Guild of Masons, when the king decided to build Windsor Castle in 1360, he obtained the vast number of masons needed for the enterprise by the simple expedient of ordering press gangs throughout the land. It was not only the navy which was staffed in this manner, and the freedom of even notionally free tradesmen was not sacrosanct in the face of state power. In 1300 the majority of people were servile. By 1500 only a few were still. Two events contributed significantly to this sweeping change: the Black Death and the Peasants' Revolt. One of the weaknesses of depending upon a servile class is that the master is, in a sense, a slave to the servant. Feudal lords were entirely dependent upon their villeins' labour. This gave the lords the whip hand when people were plentiful. but between the mid-14th and mid-15th centuries, the Black Death reduced the UK population to less than half. The balance of power changed, or at least the peasantry now had some power, those that survived. Now labour was scarce, the people could demand higher wages, both artisans and agricultural workers. The state responded by passing legislation to define pay rates and other terms of employment. But the landowning class was to learn a lesson in supply and demand, which could not be defeated by statutes. Agricultural workers would up sticks and move to another area if their demands were not met, whether the landowners approved or not. For some, this might technically make them outlaws. It may be no coincidence that it was about this time that the legend of Robin Hood arose. The matter was brought to a head by the English king's insistence on pursuing a cripplingly expensive war with France, funding the same with successive waves of taxation. At this point, the peasants truly did become revolting. Enter Wat Tyler, John Ball, Jack Straw et al. But we'll not go there, fascinating though it all was. The message is simply this: freedom was in the air. The people's political consciousness had been raised. The message for feminists is that history is the story of the struggle of the mass of common people for better conditions of life. Men and women were as one in this, though it was men who led when things turned nasty. But the battles were waged for the benefit of the whole family against the landowning classes.